During the wake of his 10-year-old daughter who had drowned, the father sees his daughter blinking, and when he discovers what has happened, he immediately calls the police. It was still dark. The neighbor's rooster had not even crowed yet. Raymond opened his eyes in the silence of the simple house, the ceiling stained with moisture. The smell of brick and lime stuck to his hands, even though he had bathed the night before. His body ached, but he was used to it. The life of a bricklayer gave him no rest. He got up slowly, trying not to make any noise in the next room. Lucy's soft breathing filled the early morning. He looked at his daughter, who was still sleeping peacefully through a crack in the door before going to the kitchen. That girl was all he had, everything since he lost his wife to cancer. On the small table, there was only the bare necessities. He heated some black coffee in the pot. The smell filled the kitchen. He grabbed some bread from the day before, buttered it, wrapped it in paper, and left it aside for when the girl woke up. He made another one just like it and put it in his worn cloth bag with cement and dust stains. To anyone else, it was almost nothing, but to Raymond, it was the fuel for the day. Before leaving, he returned to the room, his heart always tightened in those seconds. Lucy slept wrapped in the colorful blanket that her grandmother had sewn. Her tousled hair fell over her face, so small, so fragile. He knelt beside the bed and just looked at her. Sometimes he thought that if he could, he would stay there forever, just watching her breathe. Carefully, he kissed her on the forehead. A long kiss, full of silence. And then, as if sensing her father's presence, Lucy opened one eye sleepily. Lazily, voice came out softly, almost like a sigh. "I love you, Daddy." Raymond felt a lump in his throat. Those 3 words were worth more than any salary, more than any house or car. He took a deep breath, trying to hold back his emotions. He forced a smile and replied softly, almost afraid of breaking the moment. "And I love you more, my girl. Don't be long getting up. Yes, I left you bread and butter. Don't be late because in a little while Magdalena will come by to take you to school." She closed her eyes again, calm as if the world were all right just because he was there. Raymond stood there a few more seconds. Looking at his rough hand, he adjusted the blanket over his daughter's shoulders, then got up slowly without making a sound. His gaze showed enormous pride, but also a little fear. Fear of not being able to cope with everything. Fear that the harshness of life would somehow separate him from her. He grabbed his bag, put his old cap on his head, and went out into the still dark street. The cold, early morning air hit his face. He took a deep breath, smelling the wet earth in his heart. He carried that "I love you" with him like an invisible metal. It was just another ordinary workday, but for Raymond it always began with the same miracle, the simple, deep love of his daughter. Later the sun was high in the sky and the construction site was bustling. The noise of the sledgehammers hitting the concrete mixed with the sound of the shovel blades scraping the floor of the mixer, turning non-stop, dust in the air, the smell of wet cement, sweat running down the face of every worker. It was the same heavy routine as always, but in the midst of that chaos, Raymond carried something different in his pocket. At lunchtime, the men sat in a circle, each with his lunchbox, laughing at silly jokes to lighten the day. Raymond opened the simple bag he had brought from home and took out the slightly stale bread with butter and a piece of fruit. As he took a slow bite, he remained silent for a few seconds, looking at his colleagues. One of them, Javier, joked, "What's up, Raymond? Are you thinking about the love of your life?" Raymond smiled a little shyly and replied, "Well, yes, I am." The others laughed and joked, thinking he was referring to a woman, but Raymond reached into his pants pocket and took out a piece of paper folded very carefully, as if it were something sacred. He unfolded it slowly, revealing a drawing made with colored pencils of a big man with strong arms, carrying a bucket with a huge smile on his face. Above it, in a child's crooked handwriting, was written, "My dad, the strongest in the world." Silence fell for a few moments until the joker stood there staring, not knowing what to say. Raymond looked down, running his fingertips over the lines of the drawing as if he were touching his daughter. His voice came out low and tight. Lucy made it yesterday. She gave it to me before bed and said it was so I would remember her while I was here. One of the men, Pedro, took a deep breath and said, "Wow, you're lucky. She sees you as a hero." Raymond smiled a little, but his eyes filled with tears. He folded the paper carefully, as if it were glass, and put it back in his pocket. He patted the fabric to feel the drawing there close to his heart. "This paper is worth more than my entire salary," he murmured. The others nodded silently. Javier tried to break the moment and said jokingly, "So now we have to treat the strongest man in the world with care, lest he start." Everyone laughed, even Raymond, but his laughter was different. It was a laugh full of love, pride, and a beautiful weight in his chest. He knew that this piece of paper was not just a drawing. It was a simple and pure way for a little girl to say, "I trust you. I believe in you." While his co-workers returned to work, Raymond stayed a little longer with his hand in his pocket. He pressed the paper against his chest and silently made a promise that no one heard. "I will be strong, my girl, strong so that you will never lack anything." Then he took a deep breath, grabbed his tools, and returned to work, carrying within him a strength that did not come from his muscles, but from the love of that girl who called him a hero. The noise of the hammers could still be heard when Raymond's cell phone vibrated in his pants pocket. He took it out with his cement-covered hand without cleaning it properly and held it to his ear. "Okay," he said, panting, thinking it was just another work notice. But the voice on the other end wasn't normal. It was trembling, full of despair. "Raymond, it's me, the hospital director." She was breathing fast, seeming to choke on her own words. "It's about your daughter, Lucy." Raymond felt a chill run down his spine. His heart raced. "My daughter? What happened to my daughter?" Silence on the other end for a few seconds until her voice returned. "Broken, she fell into the river near the school. And she's not okay." Raymond froze in place. The sound of the construction site disappeared as if everything around him had been swallowed up by nothingness. "What? How?" "She fell. No. No. Lucy, where is my daughter?" The director began to cry. He heard her sobs mixed with her words. "Raymond, forgive me. She's in very bad shape." At that moment, it was as if the world had ended. The cell phone fell from his hand and hit the hard ground, breaking the silence with a sharp crack. Raymond grabbed his head with both hands, staggered, and then a scream came out of his throat. A scream that didn't seem human, echoing throughout the construction site. "No, my girl, no." His co-workers stopped instantly. The hammers fell silent. The mixer spinning no longer made sense. Everyone looked at Raymond, frightened without understanding. He didn't wait for explanations. He ran away, his heavy boots sinking into the dust, leaving crooked footprints on the ground. The dry cement cracked under his fingers, but he felt nothing. "Raymond, what happened?" Someone shouted behind him. But he didn't answer. He couldn't. His chest burned. He couldn't breathe. His eyes stung from the dust and tears mixed together. He ran like a madman through the streets, stumbling, bumping into strangers. "Lucy, hold on, my love," he repeated without realizing he was speaking aloud. Raymond ran as if his feet weren't his own. Every step was a blow to the ground, a sharp thud from his heavy boots kicking up dust on the street. Sweat burned his eyes, but he didn't care. The city passed him by like a blur. A car almost ran him over at the corner. The driver shouted, "Hey man, are you crazy or what?" Raymond didn't even turn around. Another horn blared behind him, but it was as if he were deaf. There was only one sound inside his heart racing, beating fast and erratically, as if it were about to explode at any moment. Along the way, people tried to talk to him. "Raymond, what happened?" He didn't hear them. Or rather, he did hear them. But in his mind, only one phrase repeated itself silently, like an endless drumbeat. "My daughter, my Lucy, hold on. Please hold on." His legs burned, begging for rest, but he didn't stop. He couldn't breathe. His chest felt heavy as a stone, but he kept running. He tripped on a rock and fell to his knees, scraping his hand on the asphalt. He got up instantly, feeling no pain, and just kept running. The hospital appeared in the distance. The white facade had never seemed so far away. He sped up even more, almost falling with each step. When he crossed the glass doors, his body was barely responding. He leaned on the reception desk, panting, sweating, his breathing failing. "My daughter, Lucy, where is she?" The receptionist, frightened by his desperation, couldn't even speak. She just pointed with a trembling hand toward the hallway. Raymond ran. The cold hospital floor contrasted with the heat of his burning body. He arrived just in time to see the emergency room door closing with a loud metallic sound. He stopped, staggering, his hand on his chest. His heart felt like it was going to explode. His legs gave out, and he leaned against the wall, his eyes fixed on that closed door. His breathing was a muffled cry, his whole body was shaking, and deep in his soul there was only one plea, a silent scream that no one could hear. "Please, God, don't take her away from me." The emergency room door opened slowly, the metallic sound echoing in the cold hallway. The nurse came out, her face pale, almost colorless, as if her soul had been taken away. Her hands were still shaking. She stood in front of Raymond and took a deep breath, but she couldn't speak right away. He grabbed her arm desperately. "My daughter, how is she? My little girl, please say something." Consuel looked at him, and in that look was the answer. No words were needed. They were heavy, defeated eyes, filled with tears. She didn't want to let go. Her silence was like a knife in Raymond's chest. Even so, she tried to speak in a weak, almost extinguished voice. "We did everything we could." It was as if the floor had disappeared. Raymond let go of her arm, and his legs could no longer support him. He fell to his knees, hard as stone, crashing onto the cold floor. A strange sound came out of his mouth, something that was neither a cry nor a scream, but a mixture of the two. A broken roar that came from deep within. "No. No, my girl, no." The scream crossed the hallway and bounced off the white walls, causing some people passing by to stop and stare with pity, with fear, with comfort. He covered his face with his hand, unable to bear the scene. Raymond pounded the floor with his hands, his nails scratching the tile, his breathing faltered. He stared at the closed door as if expecting it to open again at any moment, and his daughter to jump into his arms smiling. But the silence was deafening. He began to rock back and forth as if he wanted to wake up from a nightmare. Tears ran uncontrollably down his face, marked by dust and dry cement. "Forgive me, God," he said between sobs. "Forgive me for not being there, for not protecting her." The entire hallway seemed smaller, more closed in. The sound of his pain filled every corner, leaving everyone silent with tear-airy eyes. It was the pain of a broken father, the cruelest pain anyone can feel. At that moment, Raymond was not the strong man at work or the strongest man in the world that Lucy had drawn. He was just a father on his knees, crushed by the absence of the daughter who was his whole life. Hours later, after so much crying and so much pain, the small church was full. The strong smell of white flowers mixed with that of the lit candle made the air heavy. The wooden benches creaked when someone moved. The quiet crying of the people felt like a wave, but Raymond was no longer crying in the middle of the altar. The white coffin seemed too small, too fragile. Inside, Lucy lay in a light blue dress, her hair combed to one side, her skin pale as porcelain. She looked like she was sleeping, but her silence hurt more than any scream. Raymond walked to the front slowly, as if each step hurt. He stood in front of his daughter and stared at her little face, the one that so often woke up smiling, asking for coffee with milk, asking to be held. Now she was still. He sat down beside her, took her cold, shrunken little hand, and squeezed it gently as if he could still hurt her. His voice came out low and trembling, almost unable to say the words. "Forgive me," he said, closing his eyes, trying not to cry. "Forgive me for not being there. for not protecting you, my little girl." Then he fell silent, just moving his lips as if he were with her, without making a sound. Sometimes he would run his hand over her arm, adjusting her dress as if he could still make her feel more comfortable. The people around him were crying, some praying, others saying things to comfort him. But for Raymond, there was nothing. The world was just him and that cold little hand that didn't respond. A neighbor approached him and touched his shoulder. "Raymond, stay strong, my friend." He didn't react or even turn to look. He just stared ahead as if his soul had left, and only emptiness remained. Sitting there in the back, the priest spoke about eternal life and consolation. But the words did not enter Raymond's ears. Only his daughter's silence mattered. He leaned over, rested his forehead on her hand, and remained like that for many minutes without moving, breathing heavily inside and screaming outside. He was just a stone in that church. Everyone was crying, and so it was at that wake that seemed never end. Raymond was living in the shortest and cruelest world, that of a father facing his daughter who would never again answer, "I love you." The father spoke up front in a soft voice. Words that fell like water, and the sound of people crying grew quieter, more distant. Some were already getting up, grabbing their jackets, saying their goodbyes in whispers. The church seemed to breathe slowly as it emptied more and more. The smell of burnt candles and lilies filled his chest and hurt. Raymond stayed. He was in no hurry. He touched the white wood with his fingers, ran his hand over the fabric of the light blue dress, and smoothed a strand of her hair, afraid of hurting her, even though he knew, even though he wanted to keep that face in a way he would never forget. Like someone who keeps a photo in their heart. "My girl," he said softly, almost without a voice. "I love you, my love. I love you." Then he looked at her again, time without blinking, as if his whole life depended on it. Her face was still, her skin cold, and suddenly there was a slight tremor in her eyelid. So slight it could have been nothing. A sigh from her gaze, like someone dreaming. Raymond was paralyzed. The air didn't enter. His heart stopped halfway. He remained motionless with his hand in the air. His mouth open without sound, only his eyes screamed. "No, no," he murmured, not believing. "I saw it from the pews next to him." One woman said to another, "Poor thing, he's devastated." Raymond brought his face closer, almost touching her forehead with his. The whole world became a single point. It was just the eyelid. Just that. He waited, counting slowly in his head, his voice trembling. 1, 2, 3. The eyelid moved again, a short, tiny blink, but clear. "She's alive." The voice came out like a thunderclap. He jumped up, his hands trembling. "My daughter is alive." Several people were startled. A woman dropped her rosary, which broke on the floor, the beads rolling under the pews. The priest fell silent mid-sentence and turned quickly, pale. A man jumped up with his arms in the air. "What? What did you say?" "She's alive. My daughter is alive." Raymond repeated, already crying, already laughing, not knowing what he was doing. "Lucy, my love, listen to me. Dad is here. Open your eyes for me." He leaned closer and gently touched the girl's cheek with his fingertips. So slowly, so fearfully, as if the air could break her. His eyes searched for any sign, any shadow of movement. "Raymond, please," someone whispered, "calm down, I saw her." He turned to the desperate father, pleading, "Father, I saw her." He blinked twice. "I'm not crazy, I swear to God. I saw her from the back." A man said nervously, "It's a reflection." "It must be a reflection." "Don't say that." A girl interrupted him, her hand over her mouth. "I saw it too. I think I saw it." The voices grew louder, jostling each other. People stood up. People tried to get closer. People moved away in fear. A child began to cry. A woman made the sign of the cross quickly, many times. The sacristan ran, tripped on the carpet, and almost fell. The candles flickered in the wind from the open doors, and one of them dripped wax onto the tablecloth, burning it a little. Raymond couldn't take his eyes off his daughter's face. "Lucy," he whispered, his voice breaking, "if you can hear me, blink again, please. Daddy's here. Don't leave me, my love. Don't leave me." The priest approached, frightened but firm. "Calm down, everyone. Please give her some space." "I saw her," he said. Raymond clutched to the edge of the coffin. "I saw her, Dad. She blinked. She wants to come back. She's coming back to me." The hallway became noisy with running footsteps, moving benches, people talking loudly, people praying. A woman screamed, "Call for help, quick." Another woman's hands trembled as she searched for her phone in her bag, throwing everything on the floor. A man tried to organize everyone. "Step back. Leave Dad alone. Give him air. Give him air." Raymond leaned his face down until he almost touched her. Tears falling on the wood, his lips trembling uncontrollably. "My girl, my girl." Chaos erupted like lightning inside the church, voices, cries, footsteps, the doorbell ringing unintentionally, and in the midst of it all, his certainty breaking the old silence of the wake. "My daughter is alive." The ambulance siren crossed the streets like a metallic lament. The red lights flashing non-stop, reflecting on the windows, on the walls of the houses, on the frightened faces of those who stopped to look inside the vehicle. Lucy's small body lay connected to makeshift devices, oxygen on her face, cables across her chest, her heart beating weakly and regularly. Raymond sat next to the stretcher, squeezing her hand between his. His daughter's hand was cold and limp, and that killed him inside. He cried silently, tears falling onto his uniform, dirty with cement and dust, not knowing if it was a dream or a miracle. Every time the heart monitor beeped, he leaned over and whispered, "Hang in there, my love. Hang in there. Daddy's here." The paramedics shouted orders to each other, adjusting the oxygen, checking her pulse. But for Raymond, only she existed. Everything else was pure background noise. The ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the hospital. The doors flew open. Doctors and nurses rushed out, grabbed the stretcher and ran down the hallway. Raymond stumbled after them, trying to keep up, breathless. His soul suspended in the emergency room. Everything happened so fast. Gloves were put on in a hurry. Monitors turned on, hurried voices. Raymond stood at the door, breathless, looking at his daughter's body, surrounded by people trying to bring her back to life. Minutes that seemed like hours passed until finally Dr. Mariana approached, took off her mask, still sweating, her gaze serious but not cold. She bent down to talk to Raymond at his level, and that made his heart ache even. "She's alive but in a coma," she said slowly. "Her vital signs are weak but stable." Raymond swallowed hard, his legs trembling. He looked over his shoulder at the stretcher where his daughter was breathing with the help of machines, her chest rising and falling slowly. He asked in a broken voice, more of a sigh than words, "And the river really did drown?" Mariana shook her head, confused. "No, that's the strange thing. There are no signs of drowning." "Oh, her lungs are clear. If she had drowned, there would still be water here." Raymond's eyes widened, his mouth too, but he said nothing. "Then what was it, doctor?" "They called me saying she fell into the river." She took a deep breath, as if she didn't want to say it. "I don't know." Silence filled the hallway. Raymond covered his face with his hands, crying softly, trying to understand how his daughter could be there between life and death. With no one could explain it, he approached the stretcher, rested his forehead on the girl's fragile arm, and let the tears fall. "Lucy, come back to me. Please come back." Behind him, Mariana looked at him with a strange weight in her chest. There was no science that could provide an answer, no manual that could explain it. At that moment, there was only a broken father and a daughter suspended between silence and miracle. Night fell over the city, but inside the hospital, time seemed to stand still. The cold lights of the room illuminated Lucy's pale skin as she breathed slowly, connected to the machines. The sound of the heart monitor was the only thing that gave Raymond certainty that she was still there, fighting in silence. He sat in a hard chair next to the bed, his body leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His weathered hands did not let go of his daughter's small hand, squeezing it gently as if he could pass on his strength with his touch. "You're strong, my love," he whispered, his voice tired and broken. "Just like your mother's. She was just like you." The words hung in the air, trapped in the heavy silence. He closed his eyes, remembering the woman he had lost years ago. The same courage, the same sweet way of facing life. Now his daughter was repeating that strength, even though she was asleep, even though she was there between life and emptiness. Raymond looked up toward the window on the other side of the glass. Life went on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed by, their headlights crossing the street. Couples walked hand in hand. Someone laughed loudly on a corner. Everything was normal, but inside that white room, his world was at a standstill. He sighed deeply, his eyes filled with tears. He ran his thumb over the back of Lucy's hand, as he used to do when she was a baby, and couldn't sleep. "You were always my light," he whispered. "Please don't go out. Don't leave me in the dark." Silence answered him. Only the constant beeping of the monitor filled the space. Raymond settled into the chair, but his body wouldn't relax. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, the fear grew stronger. What if when he opened them again, she was gone? He leaned forward, rested his forehead on the edge of the bed, and stayed there crying quietly, like someone praying without knowing the words. Outside, life went on. But for him, time only revolved around that slow breathing. Deep down, doubt burned like fire. Would she come back? Or had fate already taken away the only thing that gave his life meaning? Raymond squeezed his daughter's hand tighter, and a tear fell, wetting his skin. "Hold on, Lucy." "Please hold on," he said, his voice almost breaking, and he remained there, trapped between the normal life that continued outside and the world that had stopped, which only existed inside that room. A father and his daughter in the most painful silence that exists. The door opened slowly. It was Dr. Mariana. She did not come with the haste of a doctor. She came with a careful step, almost with respect, like someone who understands that this was not just science. It was love alive in her hands. A small object, and used a little notebook, with a bent cover full of signs of wear, Raymond said in a low voice so as not to break the little piece that remained among Lucy's things. "I found this." He raised his tired red eyes and slowly reached out his hand. He took the notebook as if receiving something sacred. He opened it. The pages were covered with colorful scribbles, drawings of flowers, houses, hearts, and in between them a few short, poorly written sentences in the shaky handwriting of a 10-year-old girl. He read silently, moving his lips. "I saw something ugly." He frowned and turned the page. He was kissing another woman. Raymond felt a strange weight in his chest. It was harder to breathe. He continued reading, his eyes widening. He saw me looking, his hand trembled. The notebook almost fell. "I'm scared." The world seemed to stop. Raymond closed his eyes and took a deep breath, but he couldn't hold back a shiver that ran up his back, making his whole body bristle. The tears that had been trapped until then began to fall slowly. He brought his hand to his forehead, pressing hard as if he wanted to squeeze the pain out of his head. He looked at Mariana, lost. She saw that his voice came out and heavy. "My God, my girl, what did you see?" The notebook remained open on his knees, with words cutting like a knife. They were short sentences, but full of hidden screams. And at that moment, Raymond understood that there was something much bigger, much darker, hidden behind Lucy's silence. He lowered his face, crying over the notebook, while still holding her hand with his other hand, as if he could ask for forgiveness for not having seen it before, for not having protected her, for not having listened to the fear she had written in secret in her room. The monitor continued to mark Lucy's fragile life, but now, in addition to the pain, Raymond also felt the weight of an unknown truth that was beginning to open wounds inside him, wounds that would not heal easily. Raymond left the hospital. It was already nighttime. His body was tired, but his heart was beating fast, full of questions. He walked through the streets of Springfield with heavy steps, as if each step carried an invisible sack of cement. When he reached his street, he noticed something strange in the air. The place where there were always children playing, music coming from the houses, neighbors chatting on the sidewalks, was now too quiet. He took a deep breath and looked around. He saw some curtains move quickly, as if someone had been spying and was hiding. 2 doors closed slowly before he approached. The sound of the wind seemed louder than normal. Raymond tried to approach a neighbor who was sweeping the sidewalk. "Good evening," he said in a low voice, worn out from exhaustion. "Did you hear anything? Do you know anything about my daughter?" The man stopped the broom in mid-air, looked at Raymond, then looked down at the ground. "I don't know anything, Raymond." "Nothing, Knight," he said in a low voice, worn out by exhaustion. "Did you hear anything? Do you know anything about my daughter?" The man stopped the broom in mid-air, looked at Raymond, then lowered his gaze to the ground. "I don't know anything, Raymond." "Nothing," and he went into his house, closing the door quickly without waiting for an answer. Raymond stood there confused. He went to another house, clapped his hands, and called out, "Donna Teresa, it's Raymond. Can you talk to me?" A woman opened the window just a little, just enough to show half her face. "Raymond, I'm so sorry about what happened to the girl, but I can't talk. It's time to sleep." "You can't talk," he repeated, not believing it. "My daughter almost died. Does anyone know anything, please?" She shook her head and closed the window without saying anything else. Raymond ran his hand over his face in despair. His chest rose and fell rapidly. The coldness of the neighbors hurt almost as much as seeing Lucy lying in the hospital. It was then that he felt a slight touch on his arm. He turned and saw a very old, petite lady with white hair tied up in a bun. It was Donna Anka, the oldest woman on the street. Her eyes trembled with fear, but also with compassion. She spoke almost in a whisper, looking around fearfully, afraid that someone would hear her. "Raymond, your girl must have seen something she shouldn't have." Raymond froze. What did she see? Donna Anka. She squeezed his hand and lowered her voice even more. "I heard screams. I don't know if they were hers or not, but they were the screams of a man and a woman, and then silence. I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want any trouble. So I didn't go to see. But I know a lot of things about this place, things that no one talks about." Raymond felt the ground disappear beneath him. His heart was beating faster, and his stomach was churning. "My God," he murmured, "what did my daughter see?" The lady lowered her head, as if even the air frightened her. "Take care of her, Raymond, and be careful who you trust. There are a lot of fake people here." Then she left slowly, disappearing into the darkness of the street. Raymond stood there alone, his soul tight. The silent street seemed to hide secrets behind every door. He looked up at the starless sky, and the thought burned inside him. If Lucy saw something, if she carried that fear, does anyone here know? And someone here doesn't want me to know. The silence in the neighborhood wasn't normal. It was a silence of fear, a silence that hid truths, a silence that hurt more than any words. The house next to us had always been like a postcard of the street. Flawless paint, a low fence with well-ended flowers, embroidered curtains at the window. On Sundays, the smell of cake wafted out the door and filled the sidewalk. Matteo, with his easy smile, watered the plants while telling jokes. Rebecca kindly offered a glass of lemonade to anyone who passed by. Her son played with Lucy. They laughed loudly, ran back and forth, invented worlds on the edge of the sidewalk. Everything seemed fine there that night. The light from the street lamp made a pale circle on the ground. The perfect house had its windows closed, the curtains drawn, the door locked. There was no smell of cake, no music, only a heavy silence. Raymond stood in front of the gate and stared for a while, his heart tightened. That house was almost family, and yet no one from there went to the wake. No one said a word, no hug, no apology, nothing that hurt. He took a deep breath and clapped his hands. A distant bark answered from another street. The curtain in the window moved slightly. Someone was peeking out and then disappeared. Mateo's voice. Raymond came out, tired. Rebecca, silence. She knocked on the gate with her knuckles slowly. "It's me." Raymond heard footsteps inside, hurried footsteps, the scraping of a chair. Again the curtain trembled. This time the child's face appeared for a second, his eyes wide open, and then he hid as if something had frightened him. "My son," Raymond called more softly. "Everything's fine." The click of a key, the sound of the lock turning. For a moment he thought they would open it, but the door remained closed. Rebecca's voice came from inside, muffled. "Raymond, I'm so sorry for everything." "Thank you," he replied with a lump in his throat. "I just thought you were going to go." "Lucy loved you very much." Silence again, a sigh from inside, then the same voice, now drier as if she wanted to end the conversation. "It's not a good time." "I'm sorry." "I understand," he said, but his chest burned. "I just need to know if you saw or heard anything at all." A slight sound of things moving, a glass touching another, footsteps coming and going. Rebecca took a while to answer. "No, nothing." "Good night, Raymond." The last sentence came out quickly, hurriedly, and then another click, the bolt, the sound of the key turning twice, as if they wanted to shut out the outside world. Raymond rested his hand on the gate and lowered his head. He stood there listening to his own heart. The wall of the house was smooth, shining with the reflection of the lamp-post. But near the base there was a thin line, an almost invisible crack. He looked at it. Almost no one would notice it, but he did. "Why didn't they come?" he whispered weakly. "Why?" In the yard something fell slowly like a plate placed hurriedly, then silence. The child returned to the window for a moment, saw Raymond and hid again, pulling the curtain shut in a hurry. A shadow passed inside, dark and shapeless. Raymond took a step back. The house looked perfect as always, but there was something strange in the air. A strong smell of disinfectant came through the crack in the door. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. He didn't know. He only knew that this emptiness didn't match who they were to Lucy. It didn't match the everyday hello neighbor. It didn't match Rebecca's always open personality or Mateo's laughter. Mateo's always loud laughter. He turned slowly and began to walk, his steps heavy, his hands in his pockets, his head full of thoughts. Behind him, the house remained still, perfect, silent, too perfect, too silent. Raymond stopped in the middle of the street and looked back once more. The curtain was completely lowered, covering the entire window. He continued on with the feeling that something in that house had changed, and that the silence was now the strongest thing on that street. The next day, the little sandbox near the square was almost empty. Only the distant sound of a swing creaking broke the silence. Raymond, tired, walked slowly and aimlessly when he saw Mateo's son sitting alone at the edge of the slide. The boy was playing with the sand, using a stick to draw shapeless lines. Distracted, Raymond stopped and stood for a few seconds, watching. His heart was beating faster. That boy was almost the same age as Lucy. They used to play together a lot, running and laughing until they were out of breath. But now they were separated by an abyss of silence. He took a deep breath and approached. "Hello, my son," he said, trying to sound calm. The boy looked up for a moment, seeming suspicious, then lowered his head again, continuing with his lines on the ground. Raymond crouched down beside him, resting his arms on his knees. "Are you okay? I haven't seen you in a while. I always saw you playing with Lucy." The boy shrugged without looking him in the eye. "She got mad at me," he said in a low voice. Raymond frowned angrily. "Why?" The boy bit his lower lip, hesitated, and then spoke quickly as if it were a big secret to keep. "Because she said she saw my dad kissing a lady on the street, and I told her it was a lie, that my mom would get mad at him." Raymond froze. The blood drained from his face, the sand beneath his feet seemed to move. His voice came out and low. What did you say, son? The boy dropped the stick, now nervous. She told me, he said. She said she was scared that she didn't want to play with me because she said it wasn't right. Raymond was breathing heavily as if he couldn't get enough air, his sweaty hand across his forehead. She told you that? The boy nodded shilly, waving his hands, not understanding the weight of what he had just said. Yes, but she asked me not to tell anyone. Raymond closed his eyes for a moment, his heart beating so hard it seemed to break his chest. The memory of Lucy's notebook came back to him, the poorly written sentences, the hidden fear. He saw me looking. I'm scared. He opened his eyes again, looking at the boy, trying to stay calm. Listen, he said in a trembling voice, do you know who that lady was? The boy thought for a few seconds and shook his head. I only saw her from a distance, but my dad said it was nothing, not to say anything. Raymond swallowed hard, his eyes filling with tears. He tried to smile at the boy but couldn't. Thank you, son. Thank you for trusting me. He stood up slowly, his legs weak, his body heavy. The boy went back to playing with the sand, unaware of the magnitude of what he had just said. Raymond stood there and felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His breath short, his mind spinning. His daughter had seen something she shouldn't have, something that had frightened her. And now the pieces were starting to fall into place in a way that was too painful. He brought his hand to his face, tears falling uncontrollably, and whispered, My little girl, what did you discover? The hospital was quiet that morning when Mariana found Rebecca in the hallway. The two had known each other for years. They talked about their children, shared recipes and confidences. They weren't just neighbors, they were friends. Mariana hesitated, but the weight of what she knew wouldn't leave her alone. Rebecca called out in a low voice, almost as if asking for forgiveness. Rebecca smiled wearily, but immediately noticed the seriousness in the doctor's eyes. What's wrong? You look different. Mariana took a deep breath deeply, looked around, and then said it all at once. I need to tell you something about what they found out. It's about Matteo. Rebecca's smile disappeared. The color drained from her face. Matteo? What about him? Mariana clenched her fingers nervously. Rebecca, Lucy. Before all this happened, she mentioned it. She wrote that she saw Matteo kissing another woman. For a moment the world seemed to stop. Rebecca's face turned white, her eyes wide, her breathing agitated. No, that can't be true, she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. He cheated on me. Who is that woman? Mariana tried to touch her shoulder, but she pulled away, confused and in shock. And that's not all, she continued carefully. Lucy wrote that she was afraid that he saw her looking and threatened her. Despair took hold of Rebecca. No, Mariana, no. Matteo would never hurt a girl. Mariana, her eyes filled with tears, replied firmly, I didn't want to believe it either, Rebecca, but the signs are there. I'm telling you because you're my friend. Rebecca turned around and walked quickly down the hallway. She couldn't listen anymore. Her hands were shaking and her heart was beating fast. She left the hospital as if she were running away with the words ringing in her head. She saw him kissing another woman. Woman. She was scared. She got home without thinking, pushed open the door, went in, and found Matteo sitting in the living room, pretending that everything was fine. Matteo. Her voice trembled. Tell me the truth. You cheated on me. He opened his eyes in surprise and then laughed nervously. What? Where did you get that from? That's crazy. Rebecca took a step forward, crying. I know everything. I know about the other woman. I know Lucy saw him, and she's not the only one. The smile disappeared. His face turned serious. She stood up abruptly and raised her voice. Enough. You're repeating gossip from malicious people. Rebecca shouted back, the pain coming out uncontrollably. Stop lying, Matteo. I can see it in your eyes. Silence fell heavily. He breathed heavily with his fists clenched until suddenly he shouted, That girl got where she shouldn't have. The words rang out in the air like a gunshot dot. Rebecca felt her legs give way. She put her hand to her mouth in fear. "My God," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "So it's true." Her gaze changed. There was no longer any doubt, only horror. Trembling, she ran to the phone, her hand slipping from nervousness. She dialed with a broken voice, "Police, please come quickly." As she spoke, Matteo's cries followed her, trying to justify himself, trying to deny it. But it was too late. Too late. The words that had escaped him could not be taken back. And in Rebecca's heart, the pain of betrayal mingled with the terror of knowing that the daughter of a neighbor whom she loved like a niece had been a victim of the darkness within her own home. The police station was full of mixed voices, rapid footsteps, and phones ringing non-stop. But inside the interrogation room, the silence was thick and heavy as concrete. Matteo was sitting at the table, handcuffed, his face sweaty and his eyes red. In front of him, 2 police officers looked at him silently, waiting. After long minutes of resistance, he lowered his head, sighed deeply, and the confession came out cold, almost without emotion. "I just wanted to scare the girl." One of the policemen leaned forward. "Go on." Matteo closed his eyes, his voice trembling. "She saw me. She saw something she shouldn't have. I told her yes. I told her that if I told anyone, no one would believe me." Raymond, on the other side of the glass, heard those words and felt his heart break. Each sentence was like a stone thrown at him. His hands trembled, his whole body begged him to break down that door and end it all right there. Matteo continued in a lower voice. "I just wanted to talk to her, but she ran toward the river. She tried to escape, and I pushed her." Tears came, but not from regret. They were from fear. "When I saw she wasn't moving, I thought she was dead, so I ran away." The silence in the room became even more cruel. The police officer slammed his fist on the table. "You pushed a defenseless girl and left her there as if she were nothing." Matteo lowered his head, muttering, "I was the one who asked for help. I didn't want it to go that far." Behind the glass, Raymond pounded his fist on the wall. A scream caught in his throat, his eyes filled with tears and rage. Shortly after, Matteo was led away in handcuffs down the hallway of the police station. The sound of the chains was like a sentence. Rebecca stood there with her face covered in tears. She wasn't crying for him. She was crying for the truth that weighed too heavily for the innocent girl who had suffered for something that wasn't hers. When the police pushed Matteo out, she didn't say anything. She just looked at him one last time with a mixture of pain and rejection. The next day, before sunrise, Rebecca put some suitcases in the car. Her young son was in the back seat, hugging a teddy bear, not quite understanding what was happening. She looked at the house one last time, her eyes filled with tears. "Never again," she whispered as she started the engine. The neighbors watched the car drive away in silence. No one waved goodbye. No one said anything. Rebecca left the city with tears in her, carrying her son in her arms, but leaving her whole life behind. As the streets receded into the distance, there was only one thought in her heart. She wasn't crying for him. She was crying for little Lucy and for the truth that had destroyed everything. The hospital room was silent, interrupted only by the beeping of the heart monitor. Raymond sat next to her, barely blinking, holding Lucy's small hand, as if that were the only thing keeping her alive. Suddenly, her body moved. Her eyes opened slowly, heavy and confused for a second. Raymond thought it was a dream, but then she screamed with a fear that cut through the air. "Don't push me! No!" The scream pierced the glass door and echoed through the hallways. Raymond jumped up, his heart racing, and ran toward her. Raymond came running in, almost tripping, and took her in her arms. "It's me, my love, Dad." She was here. She was trembling, her eyes wide open, tears falling without stopping. He pushed me. "Don't push me." Raymond hugged her tightly, even though he was afraid of hurting her. He stroked her hair, crying with her. "It's over. It's over. Daddy will never let go of your hand. You never listened to me." She clung to his shirt tightly, as if holding on so she wouldn't fall. Her crying subsided until it was just a whisper. "Dot." Her breathing was still rapid, but her eyes began to recognize her father's face. "My dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was scared." Raymond rested his forehead against hers, their tears mingling. "But you fought, my girl. You came back." After a few minutes, when her heart had calmed down a little, the inevitable questions came. The doctor at her side asked her gently, "Lucy, can you tell me what happened?" She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. D. Epley. Her hands were trembling. Raymond caressed her, speaking softly. "Speak, my love. Just speak. I'm here." With pauses and a broken voice, Lucy began to tell her story. "I saw Matteo. He tried to kiss the nurse." Raymond's eyes widened, but he said nothing. He just let her continue. "I saw him. He looked at me and told me that if I told anyone, no one would believe me." She sobbed, squeezing her father's hand tighter. "I was scared. I ran to the river and he pushed me." Raymond's tears fell on her hand. He was shaking all over, but he held on tight. Then Lucy asked, "Mariana?" Softly. The girl closed her eyes as if she felt the cold again. "I felt the icy water, very icy, and everything went dark, but she took a deep breath. Her voice barely came out. I heard you call me, Dad. I heard you and I came back." Raymond broke down in tears, hugging his daughter tightly. Thank God, Lucy." Although weak, she wrapped her arms around her dad with what little strength she had. And there in that room, between tears and pain, the truth finally had a voice. And her fragile life clung to the love of a father who never let go of his daughter's hand. Lucy's words fell like a bomb. The nurse she described, her hair pulled back, her gaze always tense. The way she spoke quickly, there was no doubt. It was Consuelo, the same one who had looked at Raymond with empty eyes at the hospital and said, "We did everything we could." The police began searching for her immediately. They went to her house. The windows were closed, the doors locked. A neighbor commented in a low voice. She left with a small suitcase in the early morning. She didn't say anything to anyone. The whole city was in shock. How could someone who worked to save lives be involved in such a cruel lie? When Raymond found out, he felt a mixture of rage and despair. She looked me in the eyes, murmuring and beating her chest with her hand. She looked at me and let me believe that my daughter was dead. But Consuelo disappeared without a trace, without a phone call. No one knew where she had gone. Her name became a shadow, a ghost haunting the hospital corridors and the quiet conversations of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Lucy's story crossed the neighborhood's borders. First, it appeared in a local newspaper. Girl wakes up during her own wake. Then the news spread like wildfire. Television, radio, internet pages. Suddenly, the whole country knew the story of little Lucy Salinas, the girl who blinked in her coffin and came back to life. The headlines were strong. Wakes up at wake. Girl survives murder attempt. Miracle in Springfield. The girl who refused to die. And along with the headlines came the photos. The portrait of Lucy, still pale, lying in the hospital, holding Raymond's hand, her face tired but full of love. The reactions were intense. Many cried in front of the TV, hugged their children, and sent letters and messages of support. "That girl is a living miracle," said a woman at the market. "It's pure courage." "God brought her back," murmured a father at Mass. But not everyone took it kindly. Some in the city were divided. "This is going to embarrass us," murmured a shopkeeper. "They're already calling our street Coffin Street." "Embarrassment? Nothing," replied another. "That girl is a symbol of hope." And so, between criticism and tributes, the story spread. Raymond, at his daughter's bedside, paid no attention to the headlines. He didn't care about the gossip of the world. All he cared about was seeing Lucy breathe, even though he was afraid, even though she bore invisible marks. He ran his fingers through her hair and whispered, "You're not just my daughter now. You're the daughter of everyone who needs to believe that there are still miracles in this world." Lucy, though weak, smiled a little, and that simple smile amid so much pain made an entire country cry with her. In the hospital, there was constant movement. Reporters stood at the door, curious, trying to get in. But inside, in the white, quiet hallway, what really mattered was a little girl fighting to recover. In the midst of it all, the name of Dr. Mariana began to be heard. People said it was she who took care of her. It was she who didn't give up. It was she who brought her back. The newspapers called her a heroine. The interviews wanted to hear her version, but Mariana never felt that way. Whenever someone stopped her, her answer was the same. I just did my job. The real hero is her father. One afternoon, Raymond entered the room with red eyes from crying so much. But this time, there was something different. It was gratitude that shone through the pain. He looked at Mariana, who was adjusting the equipment next to the bed, and approached her slowly. Doctor, his voice faltered at first. He swallowed and continued, I can't repay you for what you did. She smiled without taking her eyes off Lucy, who was breathing calmly, no longer hooked up to machines. You don't have to pay anything, Raymond. She was the one who fought. I was just here. He shook his head, tears running down his face, dirty with exhaustion. No, you saved my daughter twice. The first time when you didn't give up at the hospital, and the second time when you believed in me, when no one else did. Mariana looked away, moved. She gently ran her hand over Lucy's arm and murmured, I just held her hand, but it was the love of you two that brought her back. Raymond fell to his knees beside the bed, crying and sobbing. He took Lucy's hand in one of his hands and Mariana's in the other, squeezing them tightly. Thank you, doctor. You have no idea what this means to me. Mariana took a deep breath, trying to hold back her own tears. I know, Raymond. I was a daughter too, and I know the value of a parent who never lets go. The room fell silent, only the soft sound of Lucy's breathing filling the space like fragile music. Raymond slowly got up, still crying, and looked at Mariana with a gratitude that could not be put into words. God put you in my daughter's path, and I will never forget that. She smiled, lowering her head, because sometimes the most beautiful truth needs no answer. And in that moment, in the middle of a hospital full of pain, there was something strange. The certainty that love, together with faith, had conquered death. The following weeks were a silent struggle. Lucy came home, but she was no longer the same girl who used to run happily around the yard. Her body was alive, but her eyes were shadowed. Just hearing the water from the shower made her panic. Daddy, don't leave me alone, she would say, clinging to his arm. Raymond would sit on the edge of the bathroom with his back to her, waiting while she took a quick shower, always with the door ajar. Sometimes she would cry softly when she felt the water on her skin. He pretended not to hear, but each of her sobs was like a knife in his chest. At night her bed remained untouched. Lucy could only sleep, hugging her dad, curled up like when she was a baby. Her breathing was heavy, sometimes interrupted by nightmares. Don't push me, she would scream in her sleep, her body trembling. Raymond would hold her tight hand and murmured, It's over, my love. Daddy's here. No one will ever hurt you again. But there was also something new. Lucy was slowly beginning to talk. She no longer remained silent as before. She grabbed colored pencils and notebooks and drew what she felt. She scribbled dark rivers, but she also drew flowers, suns, and huge hands holding hers. One day she showed her dad a drawing of a broken heart, held together with colored tape. This is how I feel, she said seriously, but without crying. Raymond swallowed hard, stroked her hair, and replied, Then we're going to tape that heart back together every day until it's whole again. And for the first time in a long time, Lucy smiled, a small, shy smile, but it was a smile. A few days later, in the simple backyard of the house, Raymond appeared with a sack full of flower seedlings. The soil was still dry, but he had already made holes in the ground, dot in the ground. He called to his daughter, Come here, my girl. Today we're going to plant life. Lucy approached curiously, still afraid to go out alone, but trusting him. The two knelt down next to each other. The black soil stained her little hands, and Raymond smiled when he saw that she wasn't complaining. Every flower we plant, he explained in a soft voice, is a part of you that survived. Lucy looked at him with shining eyes. Then let's plant lots of them. Raymond's heart could hardly bear it. He laughed through his tears and handed her another seedling. We'll plant as many as will fit in this yard, and if they don't fit, we'll find another place. And so, with hands full of soil and tears mixed with smiles, father and daughter filled the yard with flowers. It was a simple garden, but it held a miracle. The slow rebirth of a girl who had faced death and was now slowly learning to blossom anew. The village mailman and almost never brought anything other than bills. But that morning, when Raymond opened the small rusty metal box, he found a carefully folded envelope with his name written by hand. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Rebecca sat on the doorstep, her heart heavy even before she opened it. Her thick, calloused fingers trembled as she broke the paper inside. A letter written in crooked lines, some stained with tears. Raymond, I have no right to ask for anything, but I need to tell you. Forgive me, I didn't know. I was also deceived. I believed in the man who lived by my side, and I discovered too late the monster he was hiding. I know that nothing can erase what happened. Nothing can take away the pain that you and Lucy carry. But I want you to know that I also lost everything. I lost my home. I lost my wits. I lost my confidence. Today I am just a mother trying to protect my son from a shadow I never chose. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I cry every day for your daughter and that I will carry this guilt with me forever, Rebecca. Raymond stared at the words, her vision blurred by the tears that fell uncontrollably. Her hands clutched the paper as if they wanted to take away the weight of those words. Lucy appeared behind him, curious. Daddy, who wrote this? He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, forcing a tired smile. Someone who has also suffered. His daughter leaned silently on his shoulder. Raymond took a deep breath, folded the letter fully, and held it against his chest. Then he murmured more to himself than to her. I don't hate you, Rebecca. I don't hate you. You survived too. A gentle breeze blew through the courtyard, stirring the newly planted flowers. Raymond closed his eyes, letting the tears fall in peace. For the first time, they were not only tears of pain, they were also tears of silent forgiveness that did not erase the past, but closed a cycle. And in that moment, he knew how to survive. It was not just fighting against death, it was also learning not to let hatred win. The first day back at school seemed like a bigger challenge than any hospital. Lucy woke up early and put on her uniform with her dad's help, but her eyes were sad and dull as he braided her hair. He noticed that she was breathing fast with hidden fear. You don't have to go if you don't want to, my love, Raymond said in a calm voice. She shook her head slowly. Menno, I'm just afraid of what they're going to say. Raymond knelt in front of her, took her little hands and said firmly, It doesn't matter what they say. You're alive, and that's the most beautiful thing in the world. But remember, you have to tell me everything. Yes, if anything strange happens, you tell me. Lucy took a deep breath, hugged her father, and they walked together to school. With each step, her heart beat faster. When they reached the door, the noise of the children playing made Lucy squeeze her father's hand tighter. She lowered her head as if she wanted to disappear. But when she entered the classroom, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, everyone stood up, and applause filled the room. Children were smiling and clapping, some shouting, Lucy, Lucy! The teachers were also crying, some wiping their eyes in secret. The principal approached, hugged the girl, and said softly, Welcome back, dear Lucy. She slowly raised her eyes, surprised. Her heart, which had been tight, began to open, and then, amid all that applause, she looked toward the door. There was Raymond standing with his arms crossed, trying to hold back his tears. She smiled shilly, but truly, I did it, Dad. He couldn't respond, only nodding with his chest full of pride and emotion. In the days that followed, the school routine returned, but it wasn't easy. Lucy still had shadows. She didn't talk much and remained silent during recess until one day during break. She sat alone on a bench in the courtyard. A girl approached her slowly. She had sad eyes but a sweet smile. She sat down next to her without asking permission. They remained silent for a while, just watching the children run back and forth. Suddenly the girl said, "I was scared too." Lucy turned her face in surprise. "You too?" The girl felt her hands playing with hers. "My parents fought a lot, and I was afraid of losing them. It's different, but I know what it's like to not be able to sleep. I know how it feels to have your heart tight all the time." Lucy took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was the only one who felt that way." "No." The girl smiled a little. "We can feel it together if you want." They looked at each other in silence and without saying anything else. They hugged each other tightly. It was a little girl's hug, but it was full of understanding. In that hug, Lucy felt something new. She was no longer alone, and that was as important to her as being alive. Mariana arrived with soft, quiet steps, her gown folded over her arm, as if to say, "I'm not a doctor here. I'm just someone who cares. Can I stay for a while?" she asked, looking first at Raymond. He was slow to respond. His gaze protected his daughter like a wall, but little by little, that wall began to have windows. "You can," he said in a voice that still sounded afraid. Just for a little while, Mariana sat on the edge of the bed, stretched out her hand, and waited. She didn't touch Lucy until Lucy took the first step. Sometimes the girl just looked. Other times she approached slowly and grabbed one of her little fingers, like babies do. On one of those nights, Lucy took a deep breath, rested her head on her shoulder, and whispered with the voice of someone who had finally found a soft place. "Aunt Mary." Mariana closed her eyes for a second. That aunt went deep into a place where the most important things live. She looked at Raymond, asking for permission with her eyes. He nodded, moved as if to say, "Thank you for not rushing anything." The days passed. Raymond remained steadfastly present in everything. He made breakfast, combed Lucy's hair, and made sure the hallway light was on at bedtime. But Mariana found ways to help. She would arrive in the afternoon with a pot of soup smelling of corn and cilantro and said, "I made too much. Will you help me?" Raymond smiled shyly. We found a way at the simple table. They ate slowly. Mariana asked Lucy about today's drawing. Lucy showed her the notebook, colored stripes, crooked flowers, a big sun, and next to it a little water stain that wasn't paint, but a tear that had fallen accidentally. Mariana didn't mention the man, only praising the yellow of the sun, as if to say, "Look, there is light." On Sunday, Mariana arrived with a package of new colors, all well sharpened. She stood at the door without entering. "Can I come in?" she asked, holding up the package. Raymond walked toward her. They stood in silence for a second, not knowing where to put their hands. Then he opened the door. "Come in," he said. She entered slowly. Lucy ran toward her, stopped halfway, became nervous, and then hugged Mariana's waist. "Thank you, Auntie," she said. "You're welcome, my girl," Mariana replied, her voice breaking. There were limits, too. One night, Mariana wanted to stay later, but Raymond gently said, "Leave it to me today. I'm learning to listen to her fear." Mariana respected that, put her hand on his shoulder and nodded. "You're doing very well, Raymond." He lowered his head, moved. He wasn't used to hearing that. On a rainy day, the house smelled of wet clothes. Lucy put sheets of paper on the living room floor. "Sit here, Dad." "Sit here, Auntie." They both obeyed, laughing as they dodged the puddles of paint that spilled out of the cup of water. Lucy calmly chose her colors and drew 3 people holding hands. A tall one with a cap, another with her hair pulled back and small earrings, and in the middle a girl with a bow. She took care with the eyes and the joined hands and drew a big heart on everyone's chest. Raymond watched each stroke as if he were seeing a miracle in slow motion. Mariana breathed softly, afraid of breaking the moment. Lucy then lifted the drawing with both hands and said, "Wait, something is missing." She took the black pencil, stuck out her tongue a little, concentrated like a little girl, and wrote slowly with shaky but confident handwriting. "Dad saved me with his love." The silence became beautiful and strong. The rain hit the roof like applause. Raymond put his hand to his mouth, his eyes filled with tears. Mariana blinked quickly, trying to hold back her own tears, but she couldn't. "My love," said Raymond, his voice breaking, "I only did what any father would do." Lucy shook her head. "You stayed. You held my hand." Mariana carefully pointed to the girl's signature. "Can I keep a copy?" she asked quietly, "to remember on difficult days that love works little miracles." Lucy smiled. "Dot." She laughed. "You can take a picture of it, Auntie." She took the drawing carefully, walked over to the refrigerator, and stuck it on with a crooked sun-shaped magnet. She stood watching from a distance, like an artist guarding her work so that everyone could see it, said Raymond. He came up behind her and hugged his daughter around the shoulders, his chin resting on her hair. Mariana stood beside them, her hand gently on Lucy's back, taking up no more space than necessary in that simple kitchen with its stained walls and worn floor. The three of them formed the same drawing that was on the paper, hands joined, hearts open, quiet at love. "Thank you, Aunt Mari," said Lucy in a whisper that sounded like a prayer. "Thank you," replied Mariana. And they stayed like that for a long time, without rushing, without speeches, just feeling that with care, respect and love, a new family was beginning to be born. First on paper, then in their hearts. The sky was grey and heavy, and the wind blew strongly, causing dry leaves to run along the dirt road. Raymond walked slowly, holding Lucy's hand firmly. The river was not far away, but for her it seemed like an eternity. With each step, her heart beat faster, and her feet hesitated. "Dad," she said in a low voice, squeezing his fingers tighter, "does it really have to be today?" Raymond looked at his daughter. There was fear in her eyes, but also a quiet courage. He took a deep breath, crouched down to her level, and spoke gently. "You don't have to do it, sweetheart, but if you want to, you can look at him and show him that you won." Lucy thought for a few seconds, biting her lip, her eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. Finally, she nodded shilly. "Let's go then." They reached the bank. The river flowed slowly, but the sound of the water hitting the rocks seemed very loud. Inside her head, Lucy stopped, paralyzed, her small body trembling, her eyes fixed on the current. Raymond knelt beside her, still holding her hand tightly. "Don't look at it as an enemy," he said softly. "Look at it as a memory. You survived." Lucy took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling rapidly. She remained silent for a long time, then slowly raised her face, her eyes looking at the flowing water, and for the first time she did not look away. A tear fell, but with it came a fragile smile. "I'm not afraid anymore." Raymond closed his eyes for a moment, his chest filling with emotion, a lump rising in his throat. He hugged his daughter tightly, almost crushing her, and whispered in a firm but broken voice, "And I will never let anyone hurt you again." Lucy rested her face on his chest, listening to the strong beat of his heart, and replied in a soft voice, "I know, Dad." The wind blew stronger, making the river sparkle in the soft light of the sun that was beginning to emerge from behind the clouds. Rema looked at the water that had once carried away hope and was now becoming a symbol of resistance. They remained there, embracing in front of the river, not as victim and pain, but as father and daughter who had survived together. And in that moment, between the sound of the water and the warmth of the embrace, Raymond knew something with certainty. The fear was gone. Only love remained in the town's main square, where once there was only an old grey wall, now there is a giant painting, bright colours covering every corner in the centre. Lucy's face smiling with eyes full of life, and in her small hands a yellow flower surrounded by figures of suns, trees, and outstretched hands. It was as if the whole town had put a little piece of their hearts down there in big letters. The phrase that made everyone who stopped to look cry, "Who stopped to look?" I survived and I continue to bloom. Raymond took Lucy there one Sunday afternoon. The girl stood silently looking at the mural, her eyes shining as if she couldn't believe that was her. "Daddy," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "That's me." Raymond smiled with tears streaming down his face without him realizing it. "Yes, my love, that's you, and now everyone knows how strong you are." Lucy approached and ran her hand over the painted wall as if she wanted to feel her own skin in that drawing. Then she looked at her dad and spoke firmly, "Then I will continue to flourish forever." Raymond hugged her, and the two stood there in front of the image that was not only of her, but of an entire town that cried, suffered, and now learned to believe again. And now I ask you, who followed this story to the end? If it were your daughter, would you have seen that sign? Would you have run like way Raymond ran? Write here in the comments what you would do in the place of a father, a mother, or even someone who chose to remain silent. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you receive all the upcoming videos. Stories that move you, that make you cry, but also heal your heart. And before you go, look at this. There is a video on the screen right now, a story that has already made thousands of people cry and made them think about their own lives. Click and watch it. I assure you it will touch your